the dais and distinguished guests. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. I want to thank the organizers of this second symposium, organized both by the Shaare Zedek office here, headed by Carol Brusti, and sponsored by Tzvi and Tzvi Katz, and by Bar-Ilan University. Most of the symposium will be devoted to lectures on basic and clinical research. But there is a new up-and-coming field in research that is called research in health policy research. There is an institute in Israel, and we have an internet journal. And that's why I believe I was asked to give this opening lecture and to talk about advances and pitfalls of the healthcare system in the state of Israel. So I will try to be as brief as possible. Take my time, we're a little bit late on schedule. So first of all, we in Israel take great pride of the fact, and we'll hear later on a lecture about the Mexican healthcare system, and I know that Mexico is in the same situation. We have universal coverage. By universal coverage, we mean that every citizen of this country, and the same is in Israel, is entitled to a basket of health services. We recognize the fact that health, the right for health, is a basic human right. And based on that, governments in many democracies around the world are trying to spend as much as possible, and we'll talk about the spending, which is never enough, in order to enable every citizen, usually in return for a certain health tax, to have coverage and actually medical insurance. The main question is, what is included in this basket? What from the wide spectrum of diagnostic and therapeutic modalities that modern medicine has to offer should be funded from public funding and be at the service of every citizen of the country. But the declaration about universal coverage that exists in Israel only since 1995, about 25 years, is there, and we take great pride of that in terms of social justice. How is it done in Israel? So there are 4 medical insurers called sick funds in Israel, Kupot Cholim in Hebrew, that existed long before the declaration of statehood. The first among them was founded in 1912, and it acted by the premise that everybody is entitled to have health services, and he or she should pay according to their needs, but get services according to their ability, but get services according to the needs. Payment according to your financial ability, but the entitlement for medical services according to your medical needs. With the years, some of these 4 health funds, medical insurers, became politicized, became part of political parties in Israel, and some of the taxes that the members paid went for political expenditure. And the country decided in 1995, the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, to establish the National Health Insurance Law, and in return for 4.8% of the gross salary up to a certain ceiling, the ceiling today is 7 times the average salary in the Israeli market, up to a certain ceiling, every citizen, every employed citizen pays 4.8% of his or her salary as health tax. Those who are on welfare or have much lower salaries are entitled to a reduction, to discounts, or even not to pay at all. As I said, the main question, to which I will allude later during this lecture, is what is included in this public national basket of health services. All sick funds, all medical insurers serve as mediators between the government that collects the health tax and the supply, the delivery of care. Actually, for inpatient care, there are 27 general hospitals in Israel. I define a general hospital as a hospital that has at least 5 departments. Department of Emergency Medicine that is 24/7, internal medicine, surgery, obstetrics and gynecology, and pediatrics. Hospitals vary according or in the subspecialties that emerge from these 5 departments. Some of them are small community, 250 beds that will have only general surgery and orthopedics, and we have mega hospitals that actually serve the community with almost everything that modern medicine has to offer. I believe there is no hospital in the world that can supply today everything that modern medicine has to offer, modern medicine being so specialized and so costly. So I will differentiate between inpatient care and community medicine. Inpatient care is delivered by these 27 general hospitals that are spread all over Israel. They differ by ownership. Some of them are owned by the state, owned and operated by the state. The flagship is a 1,600-bed hospital called Shiba Medical Center in Tel HaShomer in Israel. About 40% are owned and operated by the large sick funds, by the large HMOs, and about 10 or 12% are public-private. They are public in the way, and my hospital is one of them. They are public in the way that they are not for profit. They are public in the way that they develop their services according to the needs of the community and not according to their liking or financial considerations. They are private because they are not owned by a public body, not the state and not a public fund, but by board of directors. Some of them are voluntary organizations that established inpatient care long before the declaration of statehood of Israel in 1948. Community medicine in Israel is mainly supplied by the sick funds themselves. They have family physicians and community clinics spread all over the country. So this is the basic composure or structure of the Israeli healthcare system. The question is asked, under these circumstances, with a national health insurance law, does one need to purchase supplementary insurance? Does one need to have extra insured, a second tier, or even a third tier, when you have such a basic basket of services? And the main part of my short presentation will be devoted to how do you decide what is included in the public basket of services financed by public funding, and how much should be left only to the rich who can purchase supplementary insurance. And there are 2 tiers of supplementary insurance in Israel, one supplied by the medical insurers, the sick funds themselves, which is less costly, and the other one by private commercial insurance company. And this is a major public debate in Israel. Now, in Israel, people are, I would not use the harsh term hypochondriacs, but everybody wants to be fully covered. And actually, there is a consensus in the Israeli healthcare arena that there is over-purchasing of insurance. And all in all, 78% have supplementary insurance over and above the public first tier. In my subjective view, that is shared by most of the leaders of the Israeli healthcare system, this is unnecessary, and this is a very high number. I can only tell you that the main item that is the reason why people, so many of the Israeli public, 78% purchase supplementary insurance, is because they have the right to choose their physician or to choose their surgeon. In the public system, officially, you cannot choose your surgeon. Many times they see you in the clinic, in the public clinic, and they will operate on you, but not always. Not always, and there is a concern, and people want to choose their physician, and this is the main reason to buy the lower tier, the second tier after the public insurance, that is supplied by the health funds, the sick funds themselves, and it's not very costly. But one of the debates about the implementation of the national health insurance law in Israel, but for which every Israeli citizen is very proud, because again, I will mention the term social justice. In terms of social justice, to have universal coverage is a major achievement. Now, in order to decide what is included in this basket, I would like to bring you a few examples and then to discuss how is it decided. When a new medications come on the market, how do we decide if it should be or should not be included in the national health insurance law, namely financed by public funding? As most of you, all of you know, the State of Israel was founded on the ashes of the victims of the Holocaust, of the Second World War. And as such, fertility is a big issue in Israel. The government preaches, and many of the segments of the Israeli society preach to large families, and so much so that the public basket of services in Israel will finance, free of charge, 2 children. There is no resemblance to that rule in any country in the world. Not in the country that was one of the first to enact national health insurance law, the UK, that started the NHS back in 1948. No one will promote large families to the extent that 2 children will be financed from public funding for every couple who has fertility problems. Now you have to understand, those of you who are familiar with assisted reproductive technology, ART, today there is no limit. When I went to medical school, there was mechanical infertility and hormonal infertility. In mechanical infertility, the fallopian tubes, sometimes after a girl had an infectious process in her pelvis during her childhood or teenage years, and the fallopian tubes were adhesed together, and we had to separate them in surgery. It was called tuboplasty. Since 1978, when Stepton and Edwards came with the IVF, we bypassed the fallopian tubes. In male reproduction problems, we learned in medical school, actually in high school, that you need 60 million semen cells in order to fertilize your meaningful companion or your wife. Today, even if there is one semen cell that is floating there with half failing float, we can do a micro manipulation, just drill a hole in the capsule of the ovum, of the egg, and put in the semen and fertilize the woman. So most of the fertility problems of the world were solved, but this technology is extremely expensive. Extremely expensive, and in Israel we supply it free of charge to every couple with fertility problems until they have 2 children. Sometimes there is public criticism against that, because if you take a 45-year-old woman who would like to have an in vitro fertilization treatment, her chance for success are between 3 to 5%. How many cycles of IVF should she be granted from public funding? So it's a public debate in Israel, but I wanted to bring the fertility issue as an example of how wide is the basket of services in the State of Israel. So how we decide? You are all aware of the fact that in modern medicine, the major advances are in the field of cancer, new chemotherapeutic agents, immunotherapeutic agents, biological agents come on the market every year. Many of them are extremely expensive. You will discuss, David, later on the hepatitis C issue, which is a major example of a breakthrough, an extremely impressive breakthrough in pharmacology of the last decade or 15 years, where a disease, chronic hepatitis C, for which we had cure that was saturated with side effects and had around 50% efficacy. And here new medications arrive on the market. They have 95 to 100% efficacy and almost no side effects. But they cost $96,000 per person, not anymore, but that was the beginning, about 10 years ago. How do you include in the public basket of services, financed by taxes, financed by the public, how do you include such an expensive modality, immunotherapy for cancer, and many others? All these orphan diseases where there is a deficiency of one enzyme, the enzyme is synthesized, like Gaucher that was synthesized already 30 years ago, the glucocerebrosidase, and many other orphan diseases. To develop a medication today, many of the audience know it better than me, it's between $1 billion to $2 billion. The producer, the company, the manufacturer wants to have a return on their huge investment, so the price is very high, sometimes justifiably, sometimes not. The medication for hepatitis C in the American Congress, the price was called piggish. It was too high, and it was reduced later on. So in Israel, we have a national committee. I had the honor and the privilege, actually, it was the most challenging task that I fulfilled in my public medical life. I had the pleasure to chair this national committee for 4 years up until 2 years ago. And this committee is composed of 18 to 20 people. About 1/3 of them are physicians, 1/3 are health economists, and 1/3 are representatives of the public, philosophers, rabbis, ethicists, and so on. And they convene 3 months every year, from October to December, after the Department of the Technology Assessment at the Ministry of Health publishes a circular every January 1st, a circular addressed to the wide public and to all the stakeholders that play a role in the healthcare arena in Israel, deans of medical school, heads of departments, heads of hospitals, researchers in the universities, and so on. And they ask them, please submit to us any major breakthrough that occurred recently in the healthcare arena, in the pharmacological arena, in the diagnostic arena, that you think should be funded from public funding. For 9 months, they collect the literature, and the committee that convenes in early October gets on its desk thousands of pages that attest to 2 issues. The efficacy of the technology, by the word technology I mean both devices and medications, the efficacy of the technology and its contribution to human health, whether a preventive modality or a curative modality, and the safety of the technology. And they discuss it. There is no vote. We sit twice a week for 12 to 15 hours every day. We look at the scientific data that is presented to us, and we discuss the priority. The contribution of the ethicists, the representatives of the public, in the last part of the discussion, when the medications or the devices come against each other, is usually a very major contribution, because the social antennas, the sensitivity to the real needs of the public. There is a public debate today in Israel about cannabis for medical use. Should it be included or not? It will be on the agenda of the committee that will convene on October 1st this year. But all in all, the updating of the basket every year is decided by that committee. When the government of Israel decides every year what will be the sum that will be allocated for the updating of the basket, usually it runs between 0.7 to 0.9% of the value of the whole basket. When you look at the literature on health administration, if there will be an automatic pilot that will add 2% a year, 1% for the new technologies and 1% because of the aging of the population, because the aged population consume medical services more than every other segment of the population, so much so that we have a dictum that says that in our last year of life, we consume medical services worth equally or more to what we consume from birth till the beginning of the last year of life. So in Israel it is done by this National Basket of Services Committee, and I try very briefly really to expose you to the work of this committee and how it is done, but because I have no time, of course, will not elaborate on that. In terms of the result, and you see that I entitled this slide with a question mark. selection of health indicators, because the question is asked if every achievement in the indicators that are customary to assess the efficacy of an healthcare system is really the result of modern medicine. You know that Jewish sages said that a poor man is considered dead. Now the Jewish sages in our sources are not suspected not to be sensitive to the poor. And they said a poor man is considered dead because they knew that the main determinant of health is not the medications that you get, not the diagnostic and therapeutic modality, it's the socioeconomic status. The socioeconomic status has indirect effect on your health because of the congestion of living, how many people are living in one room, because of your accessibility to health services. So indirectly, health plays a part, but the socioeconomic status is the main indicator. And if we look compared to the OECD average, and I'm sure that my colleague who will deliver the lecture about the Mexican healthcare system will give you the parallel numbers in this country. But in Israel, we spend on health 7.5% of our GDP for the last 15 years. In England, the government was ousted, fell, because there was 6.5. Today, they are 9.1. Most of the European countries spend on health around 10% of their gross domestic product. We spend 7.5. You see that the OECD average is 8.8. Mexico is part of the OECD and you spend less than us. Physicians per 1,000 population, we are a little bit less than the average of the OECD. In nurses, we are significantly less than that. Life expectancy, which, as I said, is not dictated only by the level of the healthcare system, but when we advance with the socioeconomic status, people become richer, they buy, they consume things that contribute directly and indirectly to their health. Life expectancy in Israel is one of the highest in the world. I think for men we are third or fourth, and for women less than that. Question to be asked why, but you can see compared to the OECD average, infant mortality rate 3.1 compared to 3.8. This is a criterion that is used widely to assess the efficacy of a healthcare system. So we are doing well on that, but again, there is a difference between the center of the country and the periphery, between the various segments of the Israeli population, Jews and Arabs, again because of the different socioeconomic status, but the average is 3.1. Alcohol consumption, by the way, Mexico is doing better than us with alcohol consumption. It's lower in this country than in Israel, but you see still in Israel, Jews don't drink much. Majority of our population are Jewish, and we are very low. By the way, in the rate of smoking, EU, Mexico are doing better than we do. There are less smokers in the population in this country than in Israel. That's the tobacco consumption where we are nearing the OECD average. Fuels about research. So there is cooperation between universities, hospitals, and the private pharmaceutical industry on research. A lot of clinical research is going on in Israel, and almost every university cooperates with hospitals, use hospitals as a data site for various research projects. I don't have time to dwell into that. Big data is becoming a big issue in Israel because we have these public health funds, sick funds, medical insurers that are in existence for decades, many of them long before 1948. And for the last 20 or 25 years, they have elaborate computer systems and they have all the data on their patients. The largest HMO in Israel, the largest medical insurer that insures around 5 million people, have one of the largest big data sets, databases in healthcare. I think Kaiser Permanente in the States and Shaare B'riut Clalit in Israel, and we are starting to make use of this data. When one reads the New England Journal of Medicine, you can see papers from Denmark, a country of 5.5 million people, that has big data on health issues in most of its populations, And with almost pressing a button today, you can derive very, very important data on the health of the population and on how to combat major diseases like diabetes and others. Telemedicine and digital health is quite advanced in Israel. You can have an appointment by telemedicine today with your family physician. Some of us, the old-time clinicians, are digesting it not with such enthusiasm, but that's the name of the game today. We would like to touch our patients. We would like, I'll maybe conclude before the conclusion issue, and I'm still on time. When I was a resident in 1973 in Bellinson Hospital, and the patient with abdominal pain came in, what did we do? We spent 15 to 20 minutes asking him about the nature of the pain. Where does it stem from? Where does it radiate? Is it relieved with food or aggravated with food? Is it relieved by defecation or by urination, or is it aggravated? It took time. We spoke to the patient. If the patient was not very communicative, we spoke with the family. Then we spent 10 to 15 minutes, and there are very old-time clinicians, excuse me, I consider myself one of them, in the audience, and they know. We spent another 10 minutes for mild palpation of the belly, and then deep palpation in order to try and delineate the size of the liver, the size of the spleen. Today, we have ultrasound technology that can assess the size of the liver better than the best palpation, the best physician. So we spend less time with patients. It brings to estrangement. Many of you know the experience that you sit before a physician, a family physician, or a specialist, and his or her eyes are in the computer and not directed to you. This is the price of digital health, but the benefits are numerous, and I don't have the time to detail them, and we are quite advanced in Israel, both in telemedicine and the digital health. The main pitfalls of the Israeli health system. So I already said the budget is too low. Ministries of finance all over the world know that healthcare can become a bottomless barrel. So the solution is that we should be on the floor all the time crying for money. But 7.5 of the GDP has to end. There is now a public debate in Israel. I don't know what will be the results of the elections in 2 weeks' time, but some change has to come. We have to go up to at least 8.5. The government in Israel, I must admit, ignored or was not aware enough to the population growth in Israel. When I was born in Israel, there were 750,000 people. When we celebrated our first decade, there were, I believe, around 2 million, and there are today 9 million people. And 21% of them are minority, and needless to say, minority groups, needless to say, that they have the same rights. The national health insurance applied to all of them with no discrimination whatsoever. But we were not aware enough of the rapid growth of the population and of the aging process of the population. There is a shortage of manpower, mainly in nurses, and you saw it in the statistics. There are congested infrastructure. When you come to an emergency medicine department in Israel, it's very congested. People are in the hallways, and again, we are lagging behind the growth of the population and not aware enough of the aging process. We declared ourselves a young country for years. People over 65 were 7, 8%, 10% of the population were approaching the 11%. On the other hand, I must admit very subjectively that 65 of today is not 65 or 25 years ago. But still, the aging process of the population is consuming a lot of healthcare resources, and we are not doing enough in this direction. And there is an inequality between center and periphery of the country. We recently, about 10 years ago, established a new medical school in the northern part of the country that makes its contribution to upgrading of the hospitals in the periphery, but it's not enough. So in conclusion, universal coverage is a great social justice. Even now, out-of-pocket expenditure is too high, as I explained. Updating the list of publicly funded services is an interesting and unique process in Israel, and I try to shed some light on this process in this presentation. And I also have to conclude by saying that contribution to healthcare indicators is not purely the result of healthcare systems, it's no less so of the socioeconomic status. Thank you very much for your attention.